We're talking about Josh Allen, and it's not just going to be a conversation about Josh Allen, because there was a truth in the conversation that ultimately could be applied to a Dallas Cowboys player. But one thing that I've been very frustrated about is the ways that we've talked about Josh Allen, who's absolutely, let me go ahead and start here, who has absolutely become one of the best quarterbacks in this league. He's been fascinating in the ways that he has become the player that he has. I do, however, hate the revisionist history that we've seen to do with Josh Allen, where we've made it as though he was always going to be this player and others were stupid for not seeing that. And maybe that's a hyperbole, but you get my point. Mm-hmm. There was a point where he was playing and he was just absolutely terrible at accuracy, which is one of those things that typically does not get better in the ways of going from college as a prospect to becoming an NFL quarterback. Like the learning curve is already so steep at quarterback, and the players get so much better, like the defenses get so much faster. The idea that you're going to get better at accuracy simply doesn't happen, except for this one situation where you had a guy with all of the other tools who just needed to be able to not be a bonehead, right? Not have those lizard brain moments and be able to be accurate. And somehow he figured it out. And
mechanics too. Sometimes if you have a guy with really flawed mechanics, yes, you can fix that.
But even then, I think that players are mostly what they are for the most part. Like, you have to consider it. Guys have been playing football in these instances since they've 10, 11. Oftentimes they've been playing for 10 years. And usually they've been playing with that form that they have. So having this instance where you go, oh, we'll just switch that, we'll change that. I think you get to a point at this level where a lot of this is muscle memory, and your brain is no longer focused on these mechanics. Your brain has to be focused on what's happening schematically and where defenders are and those things. So I often think you can tweak and maybe not change in a big way, and that's why I don't think that you can make big advancements, except Josh Allen absolutely did. And so I'm of the contention that Josh Allen, maybe fluke isn't the right word, but there was a good amount of luck that went into Josh Allen actually turning out to be the player that we see now from the prospect that he was.
Essentially, you're saying that nobody, no matter what they did their work on as a scout or anybody else, nobody could have projected this out with Josh Allen. Even if they did project it out, they were lucky, and it wasn't there was no thing that they could have investigated and projected out accurately, and that the only fact that they were, it's just kind of dumb luck. It's like picking lottery numbers.
I think it's a little bit more unflattering of a characterization.
Yeah, I'm just trying to boil it down, basically, but I'm simplifying it.
Ultimately, yeah, this is a guy that people gambled on the big arm and those tools and ignored one thing that typically is a pretty telling factor on, well, maybe not whether a quarterback can be good, but one of those things that is necessary for a quarterback to be good. And he just happened to find it.
And NFL scouts would tell you, and something that I'm a little more on this side than you, I guess, is that NFL scouts will tell you there are identifiers that you can see in somebody's work ethic or when you talk to them, and you can see how much they're catching on with the whiteboard work. And how much they're able to internalize, and okay, that guy's a good student. He's a good student. He's got a good work ethic. He hasn't gotten the proper coaching. So we believe we can get these things out of him that will then improve his play. So I guess my question for you then becomes, and where we can tie this back to the Cowboys, is that if that's your feeling on Josh Allen and that's kind of a fluke, does that scare you about Tyler Smith then? Because Tyler Smith is drafted. They will even tell you he's not there. It's all tools. But we believe we can get it out of him because of the work ethic, because of the type of coaching we thought he got at Tulsa, which they feel like was a little bit lacking.
Which compares to Josh Allen being at Wyoming, at least you would say.
Yeah, and then the way that he internalized some of the things that they spoke with him about during visits leading up to the draft. Like, hey, look, he looks like he's picking these things up. So if you think that that's dumb luck, does that scare you then about Tyler Smith, knowing that you're fighting against the same sort of issue?
And it's interesting that you asked that question, because my initial reaction is no, but I don't necessarily know that that's an incredibly informed reaction, right? I think if I think about it more, I actually probably will have more concerns about Tyler Smith because of that, right? I do know that the offensive line position is an incredibly meticulous one. Mm-hmm. It's one that, because we, the average layman watching these football games, can't get down to the depths of the nitty gritty and the details of these players, especially we can only really relate to it from, or maybe not only, but it's a lot easier for us to relate to it from the fantasy football and the flashy positions, the skill positions, the premier positions. And that offensive line play gets boiled down to, did that person move? Did that block got? But, the details of hands in and making sure that those things are hard to know. And so for me, maybe I'm just too pie in the sky, or just taking too many people's words for it, where I feel like those mechanics can get better, and maybe I should be more concerned about the idea that those things are really difficult to get right. And so the tools are great, but those things are some of the most important parts of blocking up in the NFL.
Would you say then that, or I guess maybe why other people would be unconsciously not concerned about this, the comparison, that if you had issues with Josh Allen, why wouldn't you have them with Tyler Smith? Because it's the same thing where it's traits and played at a smaller school and isn't really, technically sound. But I guess your issue would be, your biggest thing with Allen was the accuracy.
Yeah. And
so do you think accuracy is more of a trait than it is a technical flaw, whereas Tyler Smith's issues are technical flaws that's tangibly something that takes coaching, whereas there's no parallel to accuracy for Tyler Smith?
I think that's probably, you did a great job of sussing it out. I think that's probably more of it. Now, I do think that there are mechanical things that do contribute. Like, there was early in Dak's career, I felt like one thing that he did was he kind of like lifted his back foot.
Yeah, mechanically that definitely threw him off.
And that kind of had him float balls at time where he would not be as accurate as he should be.
Quarterback coaches will tell you the way Dak used to do it, and you can watch old tape of him to see it. He would whip his back leg out, his right leg, when he deliver. A lot of quarterbacks actually do it. When John Kitna came in here and he started working with John Beck and Tom House at 3D QB, one of the things that they had him do was rotate up on the back toe. They called it squishing the bug. Pretend like you've got your foot down and you're squishing and you're rotating up on your toe, almost like the way a batter turns their back foot in there. And the idea there is that when you're whipping that leg out, all the weight's being distributed to your front leg, you're leaning forward, and you're sailing throws.
Yep.
And so that's something that technically can be fixed. I don't know technically what they worked on with Josh Allen, but I do know that they felt like it was correctable things that would fix it, and that they thought he was the type of student that could do it. And I know that's the same line of thinking that the Cowboys have with Tyler Smith.
Yeah, so I think some of this with Josh Allen was hubris, but with Tyler Smith, and you know what? Some of this, maybe I'm just getting to a dumb brain where I go, big body, even if his technique isn't super sound, he has the things that he can fall back on. Whereas as a quarterback, the accuracy needs to be there. I don't know if you can just fall back on, I'm just going to chuck it up there really far. I don't know if that ends up being something that you can counterbalance. Whereas with the lineman, being really strong can be a counterbalance for some of these techniques.
I do want to point out, like, some of the stuff that Tyler Smith got better at every single practice we saw him. Whether it was rookie minicamp, he was good. And when we were talking about this yesterday, because this obviously we were all tying it in with this idea of, like, was Josh Allen a fluke, or was that something that could be fixed? And the Bills were right to project that it could be fixed and he could become this elite quarterback.
For whatever reason, right? Whether it was luck or whatever, like, that was, they got it right.
But when I talked to you about that yesterday, we were having this discussion, and we said, look, I had said that one of the things that teams want to see, or one of the things that teams believe shows their, like provides proof for what they're arguing for, is when you see steady improvement. When you see, Jason Garrett used to talk about whenever they'd give Dak Prescott something early on, or when they were critical of Dak Prescott on a certain part of his game, that every single time they would teach him about it, it got a little better. And so each day, like, Garrett used the example of just him dropping back and handing off the ball, his drop, and that they were like, no, that's not really it. You're not really doing that right. Your footwork's a little off. And he said that the next carry got a little better, and the next carry, and the next day it was a little better. And he's like, and we really realized, like, okay, he's internalizing this. And that's what you've seen with Tyler Smith so far at these practices, is that each time it's gotten better. And something looks like, okay, hey, there were less bad reps this time than the time before, and less, fewer bad reps than the time before that. And, it slowly was turning into, there really aren't a ton of bad reps at all, period, during these periods. He's just getting, he's putting out really strong practices, getting really strong reps, completely stonewalling Micah Parsons on a pass rush. The very next snap, or 2 snaps later, Parsons goes to the other side and literally puts Terrence Steele on his back. He runs through him so hard. And so I think they've seen this progression from Tyler Smith that helps them believe. And Tyler Smith had talked about, we asked him in the locker room about, like, hey, what's been the focus on the handwork? Because we know the hands and the footwork, those were things that teams had questions about you with. They thought it led to sloppy issues like the penalties. And he had made a point that, yeah, we've worked on all that. That's been great. But a big part of the coaching that I've received, and he pointed out, he was receiving coaching like that he had never experienced at the college level, and that he's already learning so much about football that he didn't even know.
Both within the building and with Duke Manyweather.
Yeah, Duke Manyweather. He was with him yesterday.
Outside, yeah.
Duke and some of the veterans and stuff like that. But he made specific point to say the elbows have been a big factor for them, because they've said kind of keep those elbows tighter. when you're all chicken winged and your elbows are way to the outside, that's where your arms are able to reach out and you're able to grab the shoulder pads. When you got those tight elbows, you can't really, if you're worried about keeping those elbows inside and tight, you can't reach the outside. You can't get called for holding penalties by being too far on the outside. So I think it's good that when you hear Tyler Smith talk, you see he's internalizing these things and you see that the Cowboys were right in that projection. I think that's why good scouting matters. And that's where we, again, split on the Allen thing a little bit, was that I think they could project that out. And I think they did see tangible things that they could identify. And so that's similarly why I trust Dallas when they say Tyler Smith has this skill set and we believe he's teachable for this reason. Like how there were people who doubted Micah Parsons last year as that
sure.
thing. And they went, well, we see it with Micah because we think he does this and this and this.
And I don't mean to try and like denigrate that work that the scouts do, because clearly they do significant work. I think that it's overstated, particularly in the Josh Allen case, where accuracy is something that is just a high level thing. There's a reason why quarterbacking is so sparse. Is that doing this at a high level, particularly that particular skill of accuracy or trait or skill, whatever you want to discuss it at.
And Jordan,
it's really difficult.
Jordan Love can't get on the field. They were ready to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers obviously had a resurgence, but it's also about Jordan Love hasn't been ready. And Jordan Love was the same case. Tons of arm talent, smaller school, had some accuracy issues, but we think we can project that out. That has proven to be wrong to this point. So, I mean, there are polar opposite examples of that.
And I think one of the reasons, in addition to the idea that we've seen Tyler Smith get better throughout this time, the idea that Tyler Smith starts inside actually makes me feel better, because outside at tackle, you are more on an island. It is more incumbent upon you to be on your game. Inside, you got a little bit of help, right? You're working a little bit more in a phone booth where you're dealing more with your strength than technique needing to hold you up.
You give, you get some benefits and you lose some depending on the position. At the tackle, you obviously get in trouble with holding calls because they can get to the edge, they can have speed, they get you in bad positions. The difference with inside, it's power. You don't have to worry as much about them getting around you. The only issue there with the inside is it happens so much faster. It's at the snap, they're on you, they're into your chest.
Yeah. Now, all the things that we said about him getting better, he ain't put the full pads on, right? I think that when we talk about the muscle memory, and I know there's someone on the truckwreck.com text line who disagrees with me, and that's fine. I'm happy that you have your opinion there. And you're able to display it. But I think that when it comes down to it, you're going to default to what you are typically used to in the highest pressure situations. And shoulder pads, shells, and shorts isn't that type of situation. It's when you've got people rushing full on at you, bull rushing, giving you their full gameplay at the line that really displays what you're actually going to do.